The Essential Review. This is Tech Radar's review summary that gives you all the key information you need if you're looking for quick buying advice in 30 seconds. Our usual full in-depth review follows. The Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera is just as good as the GoPro Hero6 Black, but it's not identical. An action camera, just as portable as its rival, and with just as poor a battery life, less than 2 hours. The Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera can record in 4K at 60 FPS, just like a GoPro Hero6 Black. That's more detail and smoothness than you probably need to capture your adventures. Its 12MP photos are great too, sharp and colorful, and it also shoots in RAW, though not natively in HDR. Where the Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera gets one over on a GoPro Hero6 Black physically is with its weight, 93g vs the GoPro Hero6 Black's 117g, despite having a slightly larger touchscreen. It's also easier to use, thanks to a super fast processor and an impressively simple user interface your granny could master. However, the Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera is more affordable than its rival, and that comes with a few cut corners. Unlike the GoPro Hero6 Black, the Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera is splash proof, not waterproof, not without adding a separate housing, while it also lacks GPS, an accelerometer, and a gyroscope. Are any of those omissions deal breakers? Probably not. So if you're aquatic minded, or you need to know exactly where you were and how fast you are going when you took a video, buy a GoPro Hero6 Black. However, if you're more interested in saving a few quid on features you didn't even want, the Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera is one of the simplest and best designed gadgets around. Everyone considering buying an action cam should have a look at the Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera, because it's almost exactly the same, and, in some ways, even better than a GoPro. Who's it for, and should I buy it? If you have your eye on a GoPro for some time, but haven't yet invested in one, is a great opportunity to save a bit of cash. Almost as good as its more famous rival in almost every way, the Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera is nevertheless not natively waterproof. Do you care? Action cameras like these tend to be used sporadically, and how often any of them actually get taken underwater is anyone's guess. However, simplicity is the Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera's biggest attribute, and if you've no need for the GPS, accelerometer and gyroscope found on the GoPro Hero6 Black, why pay for them? Lightweight, easy to use, and producing great quality 4K video and stills that's so easy to transfer to a phone for sharing. The Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera is an impressive way to save a substantial slab. However, this follow-up to the Yi 4K action camera is more tweak than overhaul, with the main improvement being that the Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera can film in 4K at 60 FPS. So if you've already got Yi's first action cam, skip this second version and wait for the third. Yi Technology 4K Plus action camera price. Current price, £299/$339.98. Both prices include waterproof case, an action cam that's much better value than a GoPro Yi 4K Plus specs 4K video, up to 60 FPS, 1080p video, up to 120 FPS, still images, 12MP, JPG and RAW, rear screen, 2.2-inch touchscreen, image stabilization, 3-axis up to 4K/30 FPS. Built-in image stabilization. Not natively waterproof. Recharges via USB-C port. The Yi 4K Plus isn't incredibly different to the original Yi 4K, the main addition being an ability to shoot video at 4K at 60 FPS, just like a GoPro Hero6 Black. Requiring a U3 class micro SD card to be used, shooting in 4K/60 FPS does mean a maximum bitrate of 120 megabits per second, which is double what the Yi 4K offered. It's also worth bearing in mind that, although the Yi 4K Plus does have electronic image stabilization on board, it only works up to 4K/30 FPS. Inside is the same 12MP Sony IMX377 1/2.3-inch CMOS sensor with XMOR as on the E4K, but this version has a new Ambarella H2 Plus quad-core ARM Cortex-A53 processor. They work terrifically well together, allowing the E4K Plus S operating system to work fluently and without a hitch despite the bigger bitrate. You're probably not going to use the E4K Plus much for photography, but you can. It shoots very usable 12MP images, and it's possible to save in JPG, or keep the RAW files, which is outputs as universal DNG files. It doesn't deal in HDR, as the GoPro Hero6 Black does, but since it shoots in RAW that's no big deal. Unlike the original E4K, this new version recharges via USB-C port, and in the box is an adapter for hooking up an external microphone. It takes a micro SD card up to 64 GB. So why would anyone buy GoPro? There are a few tiny corners cut on the E4K Plus. Unlike the GoPro Hero5 Black or the new GoPro Hero6 Black, the E4K Plus is not natively waterproof, although a separate waterproof case kit, which is also apparently dusterproof, is available. However, the only really noticeable difference between the E4K Plus and GoPros are that the E4K Plus lacks the GPS, gyroscope and accelerometer sensors, so your videos don't include tags for geographical positioning, direction and speed. You either care about that, or you don't. Unless you're a performance athlete obsessed by data, it's probably irrelevant. However, what is annoying, and it's exactly the same with all GoPro products, is a short battery life. The E4K Plus has a 1400 mAh battery that lasts for just over an hour in 4K mode, a little longer if not. A small, portable, and money-saving design. Weighs just 93 grams. Not waterproof. Corning Gorilla Glass. Aside from its attractive subtle checkerboard pattern on its font, the E4K Plus looks exactly the same, physically, as its forebear, the E4K. It weighs just 93 g, and its rectangular little 65x42x30mm body hosts a 2.19-inch color touchscreen coated in tough Corning Gorilla Glass. Better still, the touchscreen, as well as being a large, is of excellent quality. It's colorful and contrasty, with a great viewing angle, and it's extremely sensitive to touch. That makes the clear, concise operating system a breeze to use. I would go as far as to say that the E4K Plus is among the simplest and speediest user interfaces I have come across in the last 15 years. Its new voice control software does add to that, though results are mixed despite having to first have the E4K Plus record a voice sample. Shouting E-action take photo, E-action record video and E-action turn off, among other voice commands. The E4K Plus does herald results, but it doesn't work too well if you're outdoors, which is kinda all what this camera is for. Linking reliably to a smartphone via Wi-Fi on either 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz, the app can access all the settings on the camera and hosts an almost instant live feed. The E4K Plus has a standard tripod thread on the bottom, which is a boon for anyone wanting to connect it to the plethora of mounts available, as well as a standard camera tripod. Despite the natively easy to use E4K Plus not requiring a good app to make the device usable, which is so often the case, its free E-action app is impressive. Linking reliably to a smartphone via Wi-Fi on either 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz, the app can access all the settings on the camera and hosts an almost instant live feed. Once you're done, you can transfer images and videos to your phone, apply some filters and image effects, from HDR into the 360-degree camera style Tiny Planet and Spill Galaxy to more run-of-the-mill vintage, nostalgia and romance, and share to Facebook, Instagram, and, showing its Asian heritage, line. To battery life, which on the E4K Plus we measured at around an hour on 4K/60 FPS, and almost 2 hours on Full HD 1080p, which is relatively good compared to the GoPro Hero6 Black. However, that doesn't mean such a super short battery life is acceptable, and seems to me to signal that the E4K Plus is too small for its own good. Image quality. Clean but jumpy 4K/60fps, smooth but noisy Full HD, good wide angle JPG and RAW photos. The Yii 4K Plus does 4K at 60fps. Great, but in practice that headline grabbing feature does come with a few caveats. For example, its 4K Ultra 4K mode, its most detailed, tops out at 30fps. So does its 4K HD mode, which contains 4000x3008 pixels instead of the standard 3840x2160 pixels. However, stick it in 4K mode and the Yii 4K Plus can record in 60fps, or 48fps, or 30fps. At 60fps the results are impressively sharp and contrasty, with well saturated color. Video can be a little choppy if you handhold, which is a result of the low frame rate, particularly noticeable on camera pans, and the fact that Yii 4K Plus's electronic image stabilization only applies to 4K/30fps and below. Still, that's something for the follow-up from Yii, and besides, image stabilization can be overdone. See the Sony FDR-X3000R review for proof of that. Those after the smoothest possible video from the Yii 4K Plus should consider shooting in Full HD 1080p, which can be done in all kinds of frame rates, from the cinematic 24fps right through to 120fps, which is good for slow motion footage. That jumps to 240fps if you shoot in 720p. It's also worth knowing that, if you shoot in 4K/24fps it's possible to use an ultra-wide field of view mode, which stretches the sensor. The Yii 4K Plus also takes good still images, albeit all in a wide angle. That means you have to get really close to your subject, uncomfortably close, sometimes, though it produces a reasonably sharp images nevertheless. I didn't notice too much fishy effect, and, besides, it can be easily removed later. However, the finished JPGs often appear very compressed, contrasty, and with overexposed areas. As well as producing JPGs, the Yii 4K Plus records RAW images as DNG files. However, shooting in RAW does require a little patience, with an approximate 10 seconds wait between each shot. It also doesn't produce the cleanest RAW photo you'll ever see, but they are good enough to produce some much better looking results through Photoshop.